In Chapter 8, we review some of the major collaboration technologies. Now, this is a fairly quick chapter. I think we're all familiar with collaboration technology these days. In fact, a lot of what we use in business probably emerges out of the public space with our cell phones and the apps and things that we, Skype, these things that we use for personal use can also be very useful in the business setting. Information and communication technologies, ICT, they give us new ways to interact that perhaps didn't exist before. We can communicate in real time. We can communicate at different times. Uh, we have environments that allow us to speak face to face. We have environments that allow us to speak face to face and add in some additional features. We can share files. We can chat. There are also things that these environments lack that we're going to talk a little bit more about. On this slide, we're able to envision the evolution of collaboration technologies. It's not necessarily true that there were first generation, second generation, third generation, and fourth generation technologies. If you write your own book, you can have 2 generations of technologies or 10 generations of technologies. But the author of this textbook brought up and organized them into 4 different generations. So early on, back in the 90s, we had some of our early technologies like your initial email and online discussion forums. Later on, we started getting into things like instant messaging and texting, web conferencing. And then right now, we're in the 3rd generation where we use things like social networks, blogs, wikis, to share information. And supposedly, the 4th generation could include unified communications and universal dashboards. So I'm going to talk about all these things in just a moment. Email is a technology that we're all super familiar with at this point, um, although it seems a little different than it did initially. It used to be that if you had an email account, there would be a mail server out there, and just like you would visit a website, well, maybe not just like you would visit a website. There would be a website out there, and you would use a specific type of software to connect to that website. Usually, it was called POP mail, Post Office Protocol, and your email client would go out there and it would grab some messages and pull it down into your local email client. And an, a perhaps more advanced version of that was IMAP, which was used by Microsoft Outlook. And one of the advantages of that was that, well, compared to POP, is that with POP you would go out there and you would pull down your message to your device and either leave it on the server as a brand new message still, or you can delete it entirely. But IMAP allowed you to organize your mail on the server into folders and then mark things as read and moved into folders. And kind of the importance of that is that if you have multiple devices that you manage, it used to be that it was kind of annoying to have your BlackBerry and your home work account and your at work account, and under POP, everything, you get all the same messages showing up on all 3 devices with POP, and it would look brand new on all of them, versus with IMAP, you could have things marked as read and pushed into folders like we often do now. Now, we often don't worry about our servers as much these days because, at least as consumers, we use things like Gmail. And Gmail, everything's stored on some server somewhere else. It's not even, it's stored for us, it's just accessible by a website. So the old concepts of we have an email client that goes out to a server, pulls down all of our messages and stores them on our local computer really isn't the same paradigm we work with anymore, at least not as much. Associated with that, address books, contact management is something that made Outlook very important in the business setting, as well as calendaring. So if you put your calendars and your appointments and your address book and your email all together, that became a very powerful set of tools. One of those early technologies from the first era or first generation of um, collaboration was discussion forums, and hopefully we can kind of see some examples of a discussion forum here. So you go to some website and there are some major categories in there. Maybe there's a forum on, in this case, the Learning Center, and a forum on the classroom. It's just a website with threads or discussions that get started in a given forum. So you can have a lot of different forums, and then in each forum you can have discussions about it, and people just comment back and forth and back and forth. You see a lot of that in Facebook now, that same idea, although you can just have a status update and then a whole bunch of comments related underneath that. So this is more of the original idea of a forum, the way it looks here. If I were to click on one of these ideas, I could see how many people had commented underneath it. But we've certainly seen adaptations of that in recent years through things like Facebook. Something that's important to discussion forums, you have three important facets: posters, people who make comments; readers, people who read them; and moderators. Most people are readers. We call them lurkers. We also sometimes you have, especially in a business context, a moderator. These are people who maybe help keep people civil or take out useless content, because if you get too much junk, then people don't want to use it anymore. Discussion forums can be important to business today, not only externally where you might collaborate with customers, but internally where you deal with your own issues and problems. With distributed workforces that are all over the world, oftentimes companies are now using social networking platforms with built-in discussion forums where people can weigh in on important topics. One organization that I'm familiar with is the American Accounting Association, which has several thousand members all over the world, and these are primarily academics, but people can jump in and form groups around particular topics and then have extensive conversations and share files related to things, whether it be teaching or tax law or whatever it is that's of interest to a given group of users. Instant messaging is another one of those technologies that was used a lot in the public space and became really important in the corporate space. It used to be that you had AOL Instant Messenger, ICQ, MSN Messenger. So there are a bunch of them out there. These days, in some organizations, it can be pretty handy for people to talk back and forth. If I pull up Skype, for example, you can chat back and forth with other people online. And over here with the green checks or the orange checks, you can see who is online and who is away from their computer. These status messages are pretty interesting because it changes the dynamic of how people interact with one another. It used to be that if you didn't have this type of software and you wanted to get in contact with somebody in the same organization, you might call them and have an extensive phone conversation just to ask them something simple. Now you could be on the phone with a customer and you can just say, hey Chloe, how many units did we ship last quarter? And they can just respond real quickly, and there's no reason for the pleasantries of hi, how you doing, what'd you do over the weekend. So we behave differently, and there can be a great advantage to that, and it's nice to not have to interrupt somebody in the middle of their work, and they can just real quickly respond to you. Group decision support systems are a type of software that is very popular in the academic literature that in my professional experience has almost never been used faithfully exactly the way they describe it. Here's an image of it. So you have people working in a discussion room. You're talking about the possibilities, and then each person has their own terminal so that when it's time to make a decision, you're not perhaps intimidated by other people in the group. Anonymously, everybody makes their own vote as it comes to making a decision. Now, for me, there are reasons for using software to work in a group, but using software to make a decision with anonymous voting is not something that I've seen to be useful in my professional career. I mean, usually in the small decision-making managerial teams that I'm in, people are grown up enough that if you have an opinion, you're asked for your opinion, you're allowed to state it, and sometimes you win and sometimes you lose, but there really hasn't ever been a need to have people vote anonymously after being presented some information. But it is out there. It's a famous topic, and if you adjust this concept a little bit, I think definitely group software is out there. Web conferencing is something that you're probably familiar with. If not, maybe you'll get a chance to use it someday. It's nice that you can now video conference with people all over the world. I think with Skype for consumer use, this is very commonplace now. Uh, with your video conferencing software, you get a number of different features. You can see uh, people's screens, they can upload content, they can optionally show their videos, their audio, and over on the right hand side of this particular software, um, there are some icons that people can use to pop out, like for example a chat window. So this is kind of a different way of communicating that might not have existed in the past. Maybe you were on a conference call in the past and you only got the words but you didn't get the video, and you certainly couldn't be chatting with everybody. Nowadays you can have one person presenting and another person answering questions who's an expert on that same topic, and it's pretty amazing what you're able to do that way, and also the things that are possible with it. I know I've worked with a lot of distributed organizations where they take heavy or where they rely heavily on software like this, such as this is probably GoToMeeting.